Good morning and welcome this morning to Advanced Charting Techniques, another great webcast from Schwab Coaching. My name is Ben Watson. I'm an education coach and senior manager here at Charles Schwab. I'm filling in today for Cameron May, and I'm joined out there in the chat by my good friend, Kevin Horner. And I've had the great opportunity to work with Kevin a lot lately, not only in the webcast side, but also on the live event side. So we were just in Denver a week or so ago doing the technical analysis and option strategies workshop. So glad to have Kevin with me here, helping to answer questions out there in the chat. He is a 20+ year veteran of the financial markets and very, very capable of answering the questions that you might have out there in the chat. So glad to have him. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us today for this discussion. Whether you're watching this in the recorded version, whether you're here live, participate in the conversation. We'd love to have you be a part of that discussion. Chat your questions in along the way. I'll try to answer them. Kevin will help to answer those as well. If you're watching this in the recorded version, leave a comment in the comments section. That's going to help us out. It's going to help you out as well. Now, as we get into this discussion, one of the things that I wanted to do today, and this is a common question that comes up, and I've noticed this question. Kevin's probably noticed this question too, which is, how do I chart an option contract and its price? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to go down that road of how do we chart options. We're going to talk about some of the reasons why you would do that and some of the reasons why you necessarily wouldn't do that. But given the idea that maybe we are going to do that, we'll talk about how maybe it might be beneficial to use the tools here on the Thinkorswim platform to be able to accomplish that task of charting the performance of an option contract over time. So a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get into the discussion. Remember that everything we talk about is for illustrative and educational purposes only. None of it is considered to be a recommendation of a particular security or pattern or strategy. Remember, because we are going to be talking about options today, remember that options carry a high level of risk. They're not suitable for all investors. Make sure you're aware of the characteristics and risks of standardized options before considering any options strategy. Also, we're going to be talking about some of the ideas of probability analysis and technical analysis, fundamental analysis. All of those are theoretical in nature. None of those are guaranteed as to their future implications of what the market might do. Schwab doesn't recommend these technical analysis or really any individual method of analysis as a sole means of investment research. We're going to be focusing on the Thinkorswim desktop software platform today, specifically the Paper Money software application. Great learning environment. However, it does not do certain things that a live trading account might do, like utilizing studies in scans, doesn't facilitate the early assignment of short options in a Paper Money platform, those types of things. So be aware that there are some differences. Also remember that investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Now, I want to just one other thing. Since we are focusing on the Thinkorswim desktop software platform in this discussion today, there are other platforms within the Thinkorswim ecosystem. There's Thinkorswim Web, there's Thinkorswim Mobile. The things that we are doing here today in this discussion are going to be specific and germane to the Thinkorswim desktop software platform, not web or mobile. There are going to be some similarities, but we're not going to get into those specifically. We have other webcasts and other content that help us to understand those parts of the Thinkorswim desktop or the Thinkorswim ecosystem as a whole. So we're going to talk about not so much technical patterns, but how we might put a chart together. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of putting a chart like what we're going to do today together, and we'll look at some examples on the chart. So what I want to do really quickly is I want to pop over to the Thinkorswim desktop software platform really quick and kind of get a sense of orientation here. Now, while I do this, and once this comes up, I'm going to ask you to do one thing for me, and that is to click on that subscribe button down at the bottom of the page. Subscribing does a number of things. It has a number of benefits. For you, it has the benefit of being able to set up an alert for when a webcast like this goes live or when the recording for this webcast drops. Those alerts can help you to navigate to those results very quickly. You can come back to the content. You can see what's going on in the content. You can get back to the archives page very quickly by clicking on that subscribe button. It is at no cost to you. The benefit to us and the benefit to everybody else, and ultimately the benefit to you, is that by doing that, by subscribing, by clicking on like at the bottom of the page. That brings all of this content further up in the YouTube algorithm, in search algorithms, in people's visibility of this content. So that means we get to produce and provide more of this great content. You get to see more of this great content, and more people get to see more of this great content. So help us out, help yourself out. It's a no-cost subscription. Click on the subscribe button right there at the bottom of the page. And I'll talk a little bit about more some of those resources as we get into this discussion. So this is one of the common questions that I get, and I'm sure Kevin gets this as well, whether it's in teaching a webcast or whether it is in viewing the comments or whether it is in a live event. Can I chart the performance of an option contract? I want to go back and I want to see what that option contract is doing on a regular basis, right? I want to see what it's been doing over the time and the lifespan of that option. So before we even go down this road, I'm just looking at the chart right now of a particular stock. This happens to be Apple. And this is just my single grid, kind of my sandbox for looking at the chart of a stock. But before we get into the charting of an option contract, I want to just say simply this. Stocks, when we chart that price, depending on the time frame in which we chart that price, tend to be, unless we're looking at something like a very illiquid stock, or unless we're looking at something like an ADR, an American Depository Receipt. Now, if you're going to look at an ADR, remember that if you're going to trade an ADR, remember that they trade with currency risks, they trade with geopolitical risks. Be aware of that. But that's one of the reasons why we get these gaps in price in a stock, not necessarily here in Apple, because this is not an ADR, but if you were looking at an ADR, you would see that that price gets very gappy, and that price starts to kind of be not very smooth presentation of information. The other thing that we see is that in a stock that has a high level of volatility, you typically tend to see big range candle days or big gaps. Volatility brings price movement. Well, one of the things that we know about option contracts is that option contracts are subject to a lot of different forces, not just necessarily the buying and selling of the option contract to create where that price is currently sitting in terms of that bid-ask price. But there are other forces at work in that option contract. One of the differences between buying a share of stock, right? If we were to just come in here and we were to just simply create an order to click on buy, and we were to send that order out to buy 100 shares of Apple stock, and I'm just doing that. I'm reading through that order real quickly. We're popping that order in here. We're going to send off that order to buy 100 shares of Apple stock. And that order might fill, might not, but that's pretty straightforward. When we're talking about trading an option contract, now there are a lot of other forces at work. If I buy these shares of this stock, and I can adjust this order, by the way, I can just click on that order and I can bring it up, or I can bring it down and I can resubmit that order. I'm just going to grab that and I'm going to bring it down here a little bit. See if we can bring that order down. And then I'll resubmit this order. I'll read through that order again, click on send. I'll fire that order off and we'll see if we can buy that stock. Actually, I'll even bump it up. We'll try that again. I'll bump it up here again. Resubmit the order, make sure that I'm aware of any circumstances and any alerts that exist here. I'll click on send and I'll fire that order off. So I bought 100 shares of Apple. The thing about it is, those 100 shares, once they're in my account, they're not going to expire, right? And the value of those shares is simply derived from where the current bid-ask price is. The value of those shares doesn't change day to day unless buying and selling takes place. But the value of an option contract does change on a daily basis simply because of the things like the passage of time or changes in implied volatility, changes in sensitivity to directional price movement, interest rates. All of those things change the value of that option contract and what that projected or what that current bid ask is. So it's kind of the same thing, but not really the same thing, because an option contract decays away as we get closer to expiration, where the ownership of a stock does not. It does not have a finite lifespan. So by nature, option prices are going to be a lot more volatile especially when they're displayed on a screen, compared to the price of a stock. So in terms of comparing one or putting an option on the screen, that becomes a little bit challenging. So let's see what that looks like. And then we're gonna kind of build a dashboard almost, if you will, that might help us to visualize some of those forces at work in our option contract. Maybe would be a little bit helpful. So the answer to, can you chart the performance of an option contract, is straightforward, but it is also quite nuanced. So stick with me. I hope that you'll find that this is beneficial for you. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to drop down into the trade tab for this particular stock, or it could be any particular stock. Remember, this is an illustrative example, and I just happen to be using Apple for this particular example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to assume I want to look at let's say we look at the chart here and we see a little bit of a bounce, maybe a bit of a bull flag. I'm going to look for a long call option here on Apple. So I might go out, in this particular case, out to the 20 June expiration. It's a monthly expiration. It could be a weekly expiration. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to open up the option chain for that particular option, or that particular expiration series. Expires on the 20th of June, 42 days to go from now. And when we're here on the option chain, we get that pricing of our option contract. We also have the ability here in the option chain to change the display of information that's shown in those columns on the option chain. So what I happen to have in this particular option chain are a couple of different things. I'm going to take a couple of these things out. I'm going to leave one just so that you can see it. I'm going to remove probability numbers out of here. I'm actually even going to remove the option Greeks out of here. The one thing I'm going to leave in here is the option code. And the reason I'm going to leave this in here is because this is kind of where we're going to derive our charting capability from. So I wanted to do this and illustrate this option code, because that's how we can chart this option, right? So let's go to a long call option. Let's take, for instance, the 185 strike long call, or 185 strike call option. We haven't selected long or short yet because we haven't bought it or we haven't sold it. But if we were going to look at going long this option, taking advantage of upward movement, we might buy this option. But you notice that this option code can be broken down. You can see the characteristics of it, right? So let's decode this a little bit. Apple obviously is a symbol. AAPL is the same as the symbol of the underlying stock. Then we have an expiration date. 25, that's the year. 06, that's the month. 20 is the expiration date. That corresponds with this right here, 20 June 2025. So 25/06/20, I know, is going to be an Apple option that expires on the 20th of June in 2025. Then the next part of the code, this is like breaking down VIN numbers on a car, right? We know now the next part of the code is whether this is a call or a put. That letter C tells us that this is a call, and this tells us that the strike price is 185. So this option code, sometimes referred to as an OPRA code, tells us the characteristics of this particular option that we're looking at. Now we can take that information and we can chart that information. That's the cool thing. I can just simply right click and I can send more info on this particular option to a chart. I can send it to a grid chart. I can send it to a quick chart. I can look for a quick quote on that. I'm going to send this to our TOS chart, our Thinkorswim chart. So whenever it says TOS, that says Thinkorswim. So we don't like to use that abbreviation, but people do. But we'll call it Thinkorswim just for clarity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this to the chart. Now I'm back over here on my same single grid, and I'm looking at the chart for this particular option code, the OPRA code. And you can see that up here. Apple 25/06/20, call 185. So I know by looking up here at the symbol, Apple 20th of June 2025, 185 strike call option. I haven't bought it, I haven't sold it. I'm just charting the price of this option over time. And the thing about this is I'm looking at a 1-year daily chart. If we change our time frame down to a 5-day, 5-minute, now you can kind of get this granularity, and that's where you start to get these gaps. And there are periods of time. Remember, option contracts do not trade in after hour, at least right now, do not trade in after hours time frames, right? They only trade while the cash market is open. And there are periods of time where this option contract maybe does not trade. So if there's a period of time where that option is not trading, you're going to get, over whatever that aggregation period is, there was not a trade that took place in this 5-minute time frame. If we go back to the 1-year daily chart and we see one of those flat lines, there was a period of time right here, 918, or let's come a little more closely to where we are right now, right here, this was 324. There wasn't a trade on that particular strike price on that day. Now, obviously, more liquid option contracts are going to have more activity. And you see when you send this chart, or when we send this option symbol to the chart, you're going to see volume and open interest. Volume, and that's what these bars are right down here, that volume is going to tell you the number of option transactions that took place at that strike price, that expiration, that underlying symbol, that particular trading day. So you get a sense, was it very liquid that day? Open interest tells you over the lifespan of the option as of that day, and as I move my cursor across the screen, you can see the volume and open interest change on that particular day. What is the current level of volume? What is the current level of open interest? This is anytime you send this contract to the chart, you're going to see this information. Now, what I've added to this chart is implied volatility. But this display of implied volatility on our chart is the display of implied volatility for the underlying symbol. And so we're not seeing it displayed here on this particular chart. So I can take that off. It's not helping me because it's not showing me anything. So I'm going to go up to my Flask icon, and I'm going to take that implied volatility off of that chart. Now I'm seeing volume and open interest down here. Now, there's something interesting that this chart displays by default when we chart an option symbol. Because if all we were seeing were these candlesticks, and we see these gaps up and down, and we see these big candles going higher and lower on a regular basis, that illustrates the volatility of the option price. And option prices, especially early in the morning, can change drastically. If we were to take this back down to a 1-day, 1-minute chart, you can see in the first 30 minutes of the day, right? In the first 30 minutes of the trading day this morning, if I just zoom in on that time frame, there was quite a bit of movement and there was quite a bit of activity in terms of volume. Well, quite a bit is a relative term. There were a few contracts that were traded, right? And as we do this, now you see that volatility that occurred early in the morning. The rest of the day, the price has changed without a lot of trading activity going on, right? So we're doing this and kind of getting a sense of the fact that when we look at option pricing, there is a fair amount of volatility that we need to deal with. George gives us a good tip here, and George, I was getting to that, but so we will kind of get to that. This is one way that you can do that. You can go into the bid and the ask price of the option chain. You can right click and you can copy the code, which is fine, and then you can put it in the chart, right? And you can build a vertical spread. You could build a complex, multiple leg spread and copy that code into the chart so you can track the performance of the price of that chart. So as we do that, that's fine. Here's one of the things, though, that maybe makes this a little bit more helpful in relationship to kind of this overall volatile movement. So if you go to the Flask icon, once you've sent that Oprah code to your chart, by default, what's going to pop up is this theoretical option price line on the chart. And if you go over here to the gear icon over the right-hand side, you see this purple line right here, this purple color. It's much like when you do a comparison line. So what this is doing is it's taking the theoretical value of the option at that date with the current price of the underlying stock, and it's plotting it as a purple line. I'm going to make that a little bit wider so that we can see it. I'm going to make that 3 points wide. We'll click on OK and apply and OK. That purple line is the current theoretical value of that option. The candlesticks are going to display the bid and ask relationship, right? So that can show you that volatility. The theoretical line kind of smooths this out, but it smooths it out not based on a moving average. It smooths it out to the theoretical value of the option. So that can be helpful to kind of just center your information. You can see that sometimes the option prices higher or lower than theoretical value. And that gives you a clue as to what's going on. Because when you start to see that price of the option different from the theoretical value, that tells you that maybe volatility is increasing, that gamma is increasing, some of those option Greeks that influence our option price. So overall, what we're seeing is the progression of this option chain or this option in price. But you know what? Here's the thing. I know that option prices are going to be volatile. And I know that the option price is primarily sensitive to the movement of the underlying stock. So in and of itself, just looking at the option here on the chart, priced as it is, that tells me, cool, I know right now that the current mark price or the current theoretical price for this option, and that's probably going to be pretty close to mark, is $17.93. So I could sell it for that or I could buy it for that. I'm going to get probably pretty close to that. You can see the bid ask right here up at the top. What it doesn't tell me is what that option price is going to be in the future. And here's the other thing to think about. This doesn't, the option price itself doesn't really work in the general historical levels of support and resistance sense, because there aren't a lot of traders from the option perspective that are saying, hey, you know, when this option premium breaks a particular level, I'm going to buy that option or I'm going to sell that option without consulting what the underlying stock is doing. So that being the case, we don't see a lot of influence from those ideas of support and resistance. You might see them visually appear on the chart, but there's probably not a lot of trading activity that goes on at those levels as far as support and resistance. However, this is where we can also include our comparison to the underlying stock. So what I'm going to do in continuing to build this particular chart, now that we've taken this symbol and we've put it on this particular chart, is I'm going to come up here to the flask icon up at the top of the page, and I'm going to come over to the left-hand side, and I'm going to type in the words COMP, comparison, and I'm going to add a comparison line. Now, by default, it pops up as the comparison to SPX, the S&P 500. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to go to the gear icon, and I'm going to change this comparison to the base symbol for the option that I'm looking at. So that would be AAPL. Now, you could script a lot of this. I know Michael Fairborn in his ThinkScript class has done things like this as well. But here's what I'm going to do now to avoid confusing the purple line of theoretical price performance of that option and the price of the underlying stock. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this line to something that is maybe a little bit more recognizable when it comes to the underlying stock. So I might use, say, for instance, that green color. And I'm going to click on OK and apply and OK. And now I see that that green color, right? The green color that I see right here is telling me what the price of the underlying stock is doing. Okay. So now I'm seeing the underlying stock price in relationship to the movement of the option price. And so I can see that this call option gets more expensive when the price of the stock is going up. This call option gets less expensive when the price of the stock is going down. And when we start to see those disparities between what the price of the stock is doing, that's our green line, and the pink line, which is the theoretical value of the option, when those start to get further apart from one another, that tells me that something's happening. Maybe implied volatility is expanding, maybe implied volatility is contracting. So I can see the comparison of my stock price to the price of the underlying, or the price of the option. If this were a put option, now because this is a call option, if we were looking at a put option as our base symbol in the chart right here, it's very likely that we would see this be oppositional, right? That because the price of the stock goes down, the price of the option goes up. Price of the stock goes up, the price of the option goes down. So you're likely to see kind of that opposite movement. When we're talking about a call option, the call option typically tends to track the directional movement of the underlying stock. So that's a difference here, right? In terms of whether we're looking at a call or a put. And you know that again because you're looking at the symbol up here and you're looking at the Oprah code and you know that this is a call. And so you know that those are going to be closely related to one another. So now we've got a bit of a dashboard, right? This is helpful, right? To have this comparing the option price to the price of the underlying stock. But to a couple of people's points, right? The point is, well, can I see other information about the option here on this comparison chart? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. So watch what we're going to do now, and stick with me. Now we're going to do some simple things, but we're going to do them pretty quickly so that we build again this dashboard. So the information that we have on this chart right now, I'm going to go to my Flask icon and we're going to kind of go down through this, and we're going to look and see what we've got. I've got the option theoretical price, I've got the comparison to the underlying stock, and I've got volume and open interest of the option contract. So that tells me what the option price is doing, what the stock is doing, what the option contract is doing in terms of liquidity. But now I've got this open, empty lower panel that I can use to show what the current situation of the option is, the current influences on the option. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come over here to the left-hand side and I'm going to type in the word OPTION. And now you see I've got option delta, gamma, theta, vega. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add option delta. And I'm going to add option gamma. And I'm going to add option theta. And I'm going to add option vega. Now I've got all my option Greeks. And I can display them, I can display them each in their own lower panel. That takes up a lot of space down there at the bottom of the page. And the other thing to think about is this is simply giving me a percentage number over here, right? This is giving me where that is. So if I display it like this, I can see what the directional change has been in that particular option Greek and what that option Greek is currently at the current price of the option, the current state of the option as it moves towards expiration. You can leave it like this, and that's fine. What I've found might be maybe a little bit more helpful and probably a little bit more useful is I'm not too terribly worried about what this trend is of those option Greeks because I know various things. I know that theta is going to increase as we get closer to expiration. I know that gamma is going to increase as we get closer to expiration. I know that vega is going to decrease as we get closer to expiration. And I know delta is going to be based on where the price of the option is relative to the price of the underlying stock. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back to my Flask icon, and I'm just going to grab all of these, and I'm going to just throw them all in the same lower panel. So now I've got delta, theta, or delta, gamma, theta, vega, all in this same lower panel. Now, if I just throw them on this panel, I don't know which one is which. So we're going to do one really quick thing to help it make it easier to see. So I'm going to come down here to my gear icon, and I'm going to make delta. We'll just go across this bottom row of colors. We could choose whatever colors, right? If you click on more, now you've got all of these other intense colors to choose from. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right here and we're going to just go delta, make delta that color. And I'm going to click on OK. And then I'm going to go to gamma and I'm going to make gamma the next color in that list. And I'm going to click on OK. And then I'm going to make theta the next color in that list. And I'm going to click on OK. And I'm then going to go to Vega, and I'm going to make Vega the last color on that horizontal row. And I'm going to click on OK. And then I'm going to click on Apply and OK. And now you see the different colors down here. But what you do see is the name and the current amount. So if I put my cursor right here and I say, OK, as of today, as of right now, what is the current state of the option Greeks for this particular strike price? I can say that the option delta is a 74-cent delta. So I know that that's an in-the-money option. I can say that the option gamma is about 1 cent. I can say that the option theta is minus 10 cents. And I can say that the option Vega is plus 22 cents. So what I've done is I've created a really quick way to just kind of quickly assess what is the option Greek sensitivity to this particular option. Now, there are a lot of other ways that you can do this. You can look at the option chain and you can display that information. You can look at the Analyze tab for that strike price and you can see what that information looks like. But this gives you kind of that quick snapshot. Now, you can say, look, what was the influence on the option price when the price of the stock was moving down? You can see what was gamma doing, what was theta doing, what was delta at that point, what was Vega doing at that point. And so that can give you a helpful reference point, maybe for historical testing and understanding, right? So now, if this is a chart or if this is a view that you like, then we're going to do a couple of things here. One, I'm going to come back up here to the top of the page, to that flask icon, and I'm going to click on the flask icon. And now that I've got these all lined up the way that I want them and colored the way that I want them and sized the way that I want them, I'm going to come right down here and I'm going to click on Save as Set. And if I click on Save as Set, then I can save it as a study name. So I'm going to call this Option Dashboard Set. Oops, I misspelled that. Option Dashboard Set. And I can click on Save. Now I've got this whole list of indicators on this chart saved as a set. So if I go over to Sets, there it is right there, Option Dashboard Set. And I can apply it to a chart. So if I build a grid, I can apply that Option Dashboard Set to the chart. So I'm going to do this. The cool thing is I can, let's see, I can't share the set, can I? No, I can't. But we can save that as a set. Now I've got that that set. Here's what I can do. So if I like this grid and I like the way it is laid out as a dashboard for my option, then what I can do is I can come up here to the grid. I can click on that grid square and I can say Save Grid As. Now, currently it's the single grid, but if I said Option Dashboard, and I'm going to call this Option Dashboard 1 because I did this before, Option Dashboard, and I click on Save, now I could move to another chart, right? I could say move to, for instance, my index grid, and I can see what's going on with the indexes. And then I could come back up here and I could select my grid again, and I can come down here and I can say, there's my Option Dashboard. And when you save it, it's going to save whatever symbol you have in there. That's going to be the default. But you can change this up here. So I'm going to share this with you really quickly. I'm going to left click, share, and we're going to share this grid. So I'm going to come down here. We're going to share Option Dashboard 1. I'm going to put it out here in the chat. Whoops. Remember, when we share things in the chat or we share things in the description page for the webcast, that is for illustrative and educational purposes only, and it is not guaranteed. As Kevin pointed out, it is not guaranteed as to time or accuracy. So I'm going to share that out here in the chat for you. I will also put this in the description for the page. Now you've got an option dashboard. So the cool thing is you can find that Oprah code a number of different ways. So if you go up here to the gearbox or to the little drop down, and you, instead of going to all, you select option, you can put in the symbol. So we can go Apple. Actually, let's do this. Let's go WMT, Walmart, right? We'll bring up Walmart. So now I can go to the option chain for Walmart. I can see the expiration date. Now, these are kind of squished together. I know what the expiration date is. I know where they're on the call or the put side, and I'm displaying the option code. Why is it giving me still Disney instead of Walmart? I wanted Walmart. So let's do Walmart. Here's the symbol, WMT. Whoops. And I have to go back here to all. And let's go to WMT. We'll put that in there. We'll go to the chain. We'll go to options. Now I'm still looking at Disney. Sometimes this will hang up like that. So let's just do this. Let's go to the trade tab and let's go to Walmart. Let's go to the option chain. And let's pick an in the money put option here. 42 days to go until expiration. Here's our option chain. The 110 strike of the June 20th expiration. Right click, and we're going to send this to our cost charts. Click over there. Now there's our put option on this particular option dashboard. And you can see that oppositional movement. So the price of the stock's going down, the option is moving higher in price, and vice versa. And then I can just simply put my cursor right here on this right-hand side, and I can see the option Greeks. I can see this option Greek information displayed right there on the chart. Now, there's one other cool way that we can use this, and this is kind of getting a little bit deeper, but this is kind of the basics of how you would put together this dashboard chart for your option information. If you wanted to have kind of a consolidated view, one of the cool things that you can do in the Thinkorswim platform is you can go to this flexible grid. So let's do this. We're going to click on the flexible grid, and I'm going to make this a dashboard view for my underlying stock, my option, and some other gadgets that I might want to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to link all of these. I'm going to choose, we'll choose 3 blue to link all of these. So there's 3 blue there. There's 3, we'll make 3 blue right there. And we'll make 3 blue right here. And we'll select, let's go back and let's select WMT. So if I click on Walmart, now it displays them across all 3 of these charts. So what I've got here, in this particular case, in building this flexible grid, is I've got a grid of the underlying stock. So I can put on here on this grid of the underlying stock, I can put something like IMP, implied volatility, and I can click on apply and OK, and I can do whatever modifications that I want to do to the grid of the chart of the underlying stock. I can show it in whatever time frame that I want to show. Then what I did down here in the lower gadget is I added a chart to this lower gadget. And then I went to my Flask icon and I loaded a study set. And that study set that I had was the option dashboard study set, right? There it is right there. I'm going to click on yes. Now I've got that option dashboard study set. And if I open this chart up and I maximize that cell, now I'm seeing that information. But what I need to do is make sure that I put the option code in that symbol right there. So the challenge is making sure that you got the right things linked so that you can see the information that you want to see. Because right now I'm showing the stock versus the stock itself, right? And I'm not showing that display of information. If I go over here, and I'm going to unlink this one really quick, I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go to my Walmart option chain, and I'm going to select one of those options. I'm still searching. There. All right. But what I'm building, and if I come back to this and I go to restore cells, now I've got my option chain down here as a gadget. I've got my option information in my display, my dashboard as information. And then I come over here and I've got my underlying stock. And I can save this grid as a particular grid. We can call this option flex grid, and we can save that, and then we can display that and pull it up when we want to see it. So these are great, just a really simple way using the charting tools here in the Thinkorswim platform to build whatever kind of dashboard you want to see. Now, we've built this one looking at the movement of the underlying, or the option compared to the underlying stock and its Greeks. You can add whatever other characteristics you want to here, and you can build as complex a dashboard or a simple dashboard as you want to see. And then you can start to really riff on this and get into some of the characteristics. I know George has been asking a question about things like scans and doing arithmetic functions in the chart. All of that stuff you can do on the chart, or you can create a script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to our Trader Talks webcast page, and one of the webcasts that we have coming up, I think, is a little bit later this afternoon. This is Michael Fairborn talking about ThinkScript. And you can do even more when it comes to think scripting to build these charts and build these grids and build the tools that you want to build. So if you can think about it, generally it can be built in the platform. So that being said, there's a lot to explore in this particular area. All right, in terms of what you can do with the platform. But this is your resource right here. If you want to learn more about building flexible grids or charting an option, or setting up your charts to begin with, I'll just do flexible grid right there. And there's Brent Morris talking about grid charts, price patterns, flexible grids, grids and flexible grids. Flexible grids. There's Kevin talking about flexible grids and its advantages. So lots of different tools that you can use, lots of great resources to help you to get to what you want to get to. So I will put the link for that options dashboard grid out into the description page for this webcast. But do me a favor, remember while you're here to click on subscribe, click on like on the webcast page as well. That's going to let us know that you enjoyed this webcast, that we can do, we can continue to bring this great content out there, and it's also going to lift this content on the algorithm. Thanks to all of you for being here. My thanks to Kevin Horner for helping out today as well in answering those questions along the way. Thanks to all of you for being so engaged. I'm going to be back later at the end of the day for the 30-minute Market Movers webcast, talking about what has gone on this week and what is likely to happen next week. And so we will see you then. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.